On the morning of December 11, 2005, a small group of people gathered at the Jewish cemetery of Strasbourg-Kronenburg. Among them were families who had traveled from Thessaloniki, from London, from Israel. Some were elderly, some had brought their children. They had come to read 86 names. For 60 years those names had been unknown. 86 people, men and women from across occupied Europe, had been reduced to numbers, then to specimens, then to nothing, their identities erased, their stories buried, their existence reduced to a single line in a Nuremberg trial transcript, collection of Jewish skeletons. It had taken one researcher, Dr. Hans-Joachim Lang, years of work across 4 archives and 2 continents to give them back what had been taken, their names. But the question that brought those families to Strasbourg was not who these people were. It was why they were chosen, why 86, and who had decided that their bodies belonged not in graves, but in glass display cases at a German university. The answer had been committed to paper decades earlier. On February 9, 1942, Professor August Hirt, director of the Anatomical Institute at the Reich University of Strasbourg and an officer in the SS, sent a report through Wolfram Sievers, General Secretary of the Ahnenerbe Society, to Reichsführer SS Heinrich Himmler. "We have a nearly complete collection of skulls of all races and peoples at our disposal," Hirt wrote. Of the Jewish race, however, only a very few specimens are available. The war in the East now presents us with the opportunity to overcome this deficiency. The collection. Hirt proposed something unprecedented, a complete set of Jewish skeletons, selected from living prisoners, measured by anthropologists, and prepared as anatomical specimens for racial research. A permanent display of what Nazi pseudoscience called biological inferiority, preserved in bone. Himmler approved the project on February 23, 1942. He ordered that Hirt be given everything he needed. The collection had been authorized. What followed would take 86 lives. Hirt was not an ordinary physician. He was an SS officer, a professor of anatomy, and a member of the Ahnenerbe, the SS organization dedicated to proving the racial superiority of the Aryan people through pseudoscientific research. The Ahnenerbe operated under Himmler's direct patronage, with funding, personnel, and access to concentration camp prisoners. Hirt had been appointed director of the Anatomical Institute at the Reich University of Strasbourg in 1941. Strasbourg, in annexed Alsace, was intended to become a showcase of Nazi academic excellence. For Hirt, the university's existing skull collection, originally assembled by 19th century anatomist Gustav Schwalbe, was incomplete. It lacked Jewish specimens. In the logic of Nazi racial science, this was an unacceptable gap. The project required a chain of cooperation that stretched across the Reich. Wolfram Sievers coordinated administration through the Ahnenerbe. Rudolf Brandt, Himmler's personal adjutant, contacted Adolf Eichmann at the Reich Main Security Office to arrange the supply of prisoners from Auschwitz. SS anthropologist Bruno Bieger was dispatched to select suitable candidates. Josef Kramer, commandant of the Natzweiler-Struthof concentration camp in Alsace, was ordered to carry out the killings. Every link in the chain understood what was being asked. No one refused. The collection required death, and the machinery of the Reich provided it. In the first half of 1943, Bruno Bieger arrived at Auschwitz. His task was to select prisoners whose physical characteristics best represented what Nazi pseudoscience considered typical Jewish racial features. He measured skulls, recorded facial proportions, catalogued body types. 115 people were selected, 79 Jewish men, 30 Jewish women, 2 Poles, 4 classified as Asiatics. Among them was Jeanette Passmann, a 67-year-old woman from Gelsenkirchen who had been arrested in the Netherlands and deported to Auschwitz. She was the oldest in the group. Some were entire families, selected together to demonstrate hereditary traits. A typhus epidemic swept through Auschwitz that summer. The selected prisoners were quarantined, not out of compassion but to preserve their value as specimens. Diseased bodies would be unsuitable for the collection. By late July 1943, 87 of the selected prisoners were transported from Auschwitz to Natzweiler-Struthof, a concentration camp perched in the Vosges mountains of Alsace, 40 kilometers from Strasbourg. They were housed in Block 13 and given improved rations for approximately 2 weeks. Again, not out of kindness, but so their bodies would appear healthier for the anatomical casts Hirt planned to make. They were being fattened for slaughter. The collection demanded specimens in the best possible condition. On the evening of August 11, 1943, Josef Kramer personally escorted the first group of prisoners into a small improvised gas chamber at Natzweiler-Struthof. This was the only gas chamber on French soil during the war. Kramer later testified at his trial. He described how the prisoners were told to undress, how he placed cyanide salts through a ventilation opening, how he watched through a peephole as the people inside collapsed. The gassings were carried out in 4 groups, August 11th, 13th, 17th, and 19th. One prisoner resisted violently and was shot. His body could not be included in the collection. 86 people were killed. Their corpses were transported immediately to the Anatomical Institute in Strasbourg. There in the basement they were placed in vats of formalin. Hirt now had what he wanted. 86 bodies, preserved and waiting. The collection was complete. While the bodies lay in the basement of the Anatomical Institute, the war turned against Germany. In Strasbourg, Hirt continued his other work. In 1943, he had already exposed prisoners at Natzweiler-Struthof to mustard gas, testing possible antidotes. Gerrit Hendrik Nahles, a Dutch prisoner who worked as a medic in the camp infirmary, later testified at Nuremberg that in April and May of 1943, 15 German prisoners had a blistering agent applied to their forearms. The substance produced severe suppurating wounds that spread across their bodies. Some prisoners went blind. 3 died within days in severe pain. Meanwhile, the 86 corpses in the basement waited. Hirt had planned to make plaster casts of each body before reducing them to skeletons, but the work progressed slowly. Months passed. The casts were never made. The skeletons were never prepared, and then on June 6, 1944, Allied forces landed in Normandy. By August, they were advancing toward eastern France. Strasbourg was no longer safe. In September 1944, Wolfram Sievers sent a telegram to Rudolf Brandt, Himmler's adjutant. The message was marked top secret. The subject line, collection of Jewish skeletons. Sievers presented 2 options. The collection could be defleshed and rendered unrecognizable, but this would mean the entire project had been for nothing. Or the collection could be preserved and hidden. Himmler ordered destruction. But it was too late. In that same month, an Allied bombing raid on Strasbourg killed Hirt's wife and son. Hirt fled with his daughter to Tübingen. The bodies remained in the basement, some partially dismembered, some with their heads burned, but not destroyed. The collection that was meant to prove Jewish inferiority now became evidence of murder. When American troops entered the Institute in November 1944, they found the evidence that Himmler had ordered destroyed. Henri Pierre, Hirt's laboratory assistant, had stayed behind. He had done something extraordinary. As each body arrived from Natzweiler-Struthof in August 1943, Henri Pierre had secretly recorded the numbers tattooed on the prisoners' arms. He wrote them down and hid the records at his mistress's apartment. When the French military investigated, Henri Pierre handed over his notes. He later testified at the Nuremberg doctors' trial in 1946, providing the only link between the anonymous bodies in the vats and the numbered prisoners of Auschwitz. The French investigation struggled to identify the victims. After repeated failed attempts, the bodies were buried in a mass grave at the Jewish cemetery of Strasbourg-Kronenburg. For decades, the 86 remained nameless. The collection had taken their lives. The system had tried to erase their identities. August Hirt was never captured. He fled to the Black Forest as the Allies closed in. On June 2, 1945, at the age of 47, he shot himself in Schluchsee, Baden-Württemberg. When a French military tribunal in Metz sentenced him to death on December 23, 1953, the court did not know he was already dead. His suicide was not confirmed until the mid-1960s, when the Israeli intelligence service Mossad arranged the exhumation and identification of his remains. Wolfram Sievers was tried at the Nuremberg doctors' trial. He claimed he had been a secret member of an anti-Nazi resistance movement. The tribunal did not believe him. He was convicted and hanged at Landsberg prison on June 2, 1948. Josef Kramer, the man who personally gassed the 86 prisoners, was convicted of war crimes by a British military court. He was hanged at Hamelin prison on December 13, 1945. Bruno Beger, the anthropologist who selected the victims at Auschwitz, was convicted as an accessory to 86 murders in 1974. He received a 3-year sentence. He served no time. History remembers August Hirt as a murderer who called himself a scientist, and he was. But Hirt was also the product of a system that gave academic credentials to racial hatred and university funding to mass murder. He had the institution. He had the authority. What he lacked was a conscience. For 60 years, the 86 had no names. Then, in the 1990s, Dr. Hans-Joachim Lang began a search. Using Henri Pierre's hidden notes, the archives of the Reich University, records at the United States Holocaust Memorial Museum, the archives of Auschwitz, and the Israeli memorial Yad Vashem, he matched the tattooed numbers to identities. All 86 were identified, their names, their professions, their places of origin. On December 11, 2005, a memorial bearing all 86 names was unveiled at the Jewish cemetery of Strasbourg-Kronenburg. A plaque was placed before the Anatomical Institute. It reads, "Remember them so that medicine may never be corrupted again." In 2015, additional remains of Hirt's victims were discovered at the Strasbourg Institute of Forensic Medicine. They were buried beside the others at the Jewish cemetery. But the lesson of August Hirt endures. The collection. He called it science. The Reich called it necessary. The 86 people floating in those vats called it nothing, because they were dead. Some collections belong in museums, some belong in courtrooms, and some exist only to remind us what happens when no one says no. If you found this story as compelling as we did, please take a moment to like this video. It helps us share more forgotten stories from the Second World War. Subscribe to stay connected with these untold histories. Each one matters. Each one deserves to be remembered. We would love to hear from you. Leave a comment below telling us where you are watching from. Our community spans from Strasbourg to Sydney, from veterans to history enthusiasts. You are part of something special here. Thank you for watching, and thank you for keeping these stories alive.